Hey guys, how you going? I wanted to read you this article that I found because it pretty much encapsulates what I was trying to say with the Australian bushfires and weather modification, okay? Smart City Conspiracy. Examine the narrative for yourself. Australia is committed to the Agenda 2030 plan, which advocates for the implementation of radical changes to the central role of ownership rights of land and natural resources over the next decade. Linking this plan, authorities currently developed a number of smart city initiatives in direct response, promising locations full of sustainable programs that monitor a variety of human activities. Could it be that current bushfires across the country are part of this plan as well? What is the hidden agenda? Which we're all asking. In the following, we explore the Australian bushfire crisis, including the course of events, weather and geoengineering, Clara's high-speed train network proposal, and links to the UN-driven Smart City agenda. So I've been talking about that rail. And I also did think about Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030. Initial questions. Before examining the deeper questions behind this narrative, let's use objective logic to take a look at the path that led to these fires taking place and the inconsistencies with the official story. The resources disappear. In the latest state budget, $12.9 million in expenses was cut from Fire and Rescue New South Wales, while the Office of New South Wales Rural Fire Services, a service run by volunteers, lost $26.7 million in expenses. Byron Bay, which is currently being torn apart by fires, was promised $5.85 million for a new fire station in Kingscliff. The funding has yet to arrive. Many firefighters are currently battling the blazes with bore water, as New South Wales is currently experiencing a severe drought and was already running out of resources before the fire began. As a result, thousands of residents have been told not to expect help from the New South Wales Rural Fire Services and were left to evacuate for themselves. As we have explored previously, natural cycles are a common occurrence in this country, and the temperatures and heat experienced is certainly not a new phenomenon. And going back to the thousands of residents have been told not to expect help from the New South Wales Rural Fire Services, I heard police were pulling people over on the way out for not securing their loads and stuff properly. I don't know how true it is, but I heard it. Instead, the key point to note is that conditions regularly get so dry that if a variety of bushfires were to start at any point across the country, they would leave a distinct mark and spread quickly, especially if there was no response to contain them. What's with the fires? Recent policies over the last few years have also made hazard reduction activities more difficult, including a cutback in backburning, where authorities identify at-risk areas close to developments and reduce the load, with controlled burning in preparation for bushfire season. They also used to clear, like with bulldozers, a track. It's called a fire break. Maybe they still call hazard reduction fire breaks, but they used to physically do it as well. Not doing so adds more fuel to the fire. Fast forward to today and there is over 80 fires spreading all lit at the same time. There were 110 at one point. As we learn more about the ongoing bushfire crisis, many mainstream media news reports are now suggesting that most of the fires were intentionally lit. Most recently, 3 12-year-old boys have been dealt with under the Young Offenders Act for deliberately lighting bushfires as blazes ravage the New South Wales south coast. 3 12-year-old boys? Of course, they're going to tell you they're all under 15 or 14 so that they all aren't punished because it's not 12-year-old boys that are lighting it. Police are currently appealing for information about fires at Moonbi, Berkeley, Balgownie, Turramurra, Katoomba, Morisset and the Royal National Park near Loftus. There have also been reports of people stealing firefighting equipment as New South Wales Police probe several suspicious blazes around the state. Do you really believe this story? Children are responsible for lighting these fires? See? Yep, that's what I was saying. Weird weather patterns. Another initial question surrounding the bushfires is related to ongoing abnormal phenomenon in the natural world in anticipation for this mass event, including reductions in rainfall. On one day, for the first time in Australian history, there was no rainfall at any parts across the country, with the unusual reading leaving the Bureau of Meteorology teams scratching their heads. And if you go and see my last video, you'll understand that they're keeping the rain from even hitting Australia. The team can't identify a day in our records where there hasn't been rain somewhere on continental Australia, a Bureau spokesman said. How smart are these people, meteorologists, if they can't see what we can see? We can see all the interference from those things. Why can't they see it? At the same time, there are also many strange weather occurrences happening at the Queensland-New South Wales border, with echoes of metal or plastic fibres being recorded. 7 News Brisbane. There's been something strange going on in the skies of southern Queensland in the past day, as mysterious echoes started appearing on the radar. It's not weather related. Skies were clear last night. There was no rain recorded anywhere. One theory is that it is a thing called chaff, a small metal or plastic fibres released into the air to help shield military aircraft from radar detection during exercises. 7 News meteorologist Tony Auden. That's 7 News. That's mainstream, guys, and they're telling you this. Chaff. It is released into the air to help shield military aircraft from radar detection during exercises. A lot of people don't believe me on this weather modification. I don't know why. It's all out there if they just look. Reports also suggested in September that a rare event took place 30 kilometres above the South Pole and was expected to impact Australia's rainfall outlook. Known as sudden stratospheric warming, SSW, experts predicted just a few months ago that this could deepen the current Australian drought and will affect the skies of the north of the pole. Is rainfall being intentionally blocked to bushfire areas? We all know this technology is possible. And they had something that they said was trapping the smoke in New South Wales and Sydney, calling it an inversion. Inversion, my backside. I like how they make up all these new terms and bullcrap to try and explain things away. Geoengineering in Australia. For over 5 decades in Australia, the study of clouds, rain and the atmosphere has been largely hidden from the public as a secretive network of government agencies and private business interests continue to manipulate the weather around us to their personal benefit. Geoengineering, or weather manipulation, has now become commonly accepted as the deliberate intervention or large-scale manipulation of the climate system of Earth to counteract global warming or to influence the environment. In Australia, cloud seeding was first trialled in Australia in 1947 when the CSIRO used Royal Australian Air Force aircrafts to drop dry ice into the tops of the cumulus clouds. Following the success of initial trials, CSIRO scientists would continue this work until 1952, soon expanding it to theoretical laboratory and airborne investigations of cloud structure. As technological advancements began to take shape, so did the scale of programs and cooperations between countries to advance these technologies in the 20th century. One of the largest operations in Australia, compared similarly to HARP, what I was saying, in the United States, is the Jindalee Operational Radar Network, JORN. Yeah, the radars. See what I was trying to say yesterday, the radars. Where BAE Systems will undertake significant upgrades through a $1.2 billion enhancement over the next 10 years. So the public are going to pay for this. And it's hurting us. Great. Modern operations include weather and water experimental company Snowy Hydro, based out of the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales, authorised by the Snowy Mountains Cloud Seeding Act 2004. Hydro Tasmania and Australian Rain Technologies are also usual characters in this field. In December 2006, the Queensland Government announced $7.6 million in funding for warm cloud seeding research to be conducted jointly by the Australian Bureau of Meteorology and the United States National Centre for Atmospheric Research. Weather Modification Inc. also supported the Queensland Environmental Protection Agency during their 2008 feasibility study for the augmentation of rain and air chemistry monitoring, providing an instrumented aircraft and crew for cloud seeding. There you go. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull announced in 2007 that $10 million from the Australian Government Water Fund will be given to the investigation of an untried technology that aims to trigger rainfall from the atmosphere even when there are no clouds. This is where things that getting interesting. I think they mean to say this is where things are getting interesting. Rise of smart cities. For those who are unaware, the Australian Government has committed to a new Smart Cities plan, which sets out the government's vision for productive and livable cities in the near future. The plan represents a framework for cities policy at the federal level, and it will guide action across various portfolios to deliver sustainable outcomes for cities and the people who live in them. The Smart Cities plan sets out the Australian Government's vision for our cities, and it includes 3 pillars: smart investment, smart policy, and smart technology. Key domestic initiatives include the Smart Cities Plan, City Deals, the Smart Cities and Suburbs Program, and the National Cities Performance Framework. Coupled with a sophisticated surveillance grid to monitor and control a created environment, a UN-driven desire to make Australian cities more livable and prosperous, what a load of rubbish, is driving the integration of information technology into city management programs at this very moment, and we are in trouble. We are in trouble. This is Agenda 21, come Agenda 2030, full speed ahead for Australia. I swear to God, we're one of the first countries that it's like experiment for it. Perth's Smart Cities and Suburbs Program, the Smart Darwin Project, the Melbourne as a Smart City Project, Sunshine Coast Council Smart City Framework and Smart City Implementation Program, the Newcastle Smart City Program, Ipswich's Cooperative and Automated Vehicle Initiative, the Adelaide Smart City Initiative, and many others. Smart City initiatives have been instrumental in the development of China's draconian social credit system, and we've expressed concerns that a similar system will soon reach Australia. Ultimately, these fragmented projects will develop and connect together to make up the Smart City vision, and we're already seeing small examples of this come to light. But why is this important, and what does it have to do with current Australian bushfires? The links are clear once you begin to scratch beneath the surface. High-speed rail train proposal. Is a deeper picture being revealed? Enter the Consolidated Land and Rail Australia Company, better known as CLARA, which made a proposal to the Australian Government in 2017 for a high-speed rail train line from Brisbane to Melbourne, including a vision of new smart cities to be built along the southern route of the plan. The consortium is headed by Nick Cleary, and the company has sold bureaucrats and ministers on a vision so large it's almost eye-watering. A high-speed rail network that would open the way for not 1 but 8 new cities, each between 200,000 and 600,000 people along its route. The policy on population has failed because we have failed to overcome the tyranny of distance, Cleary says. Between now and 2061, we are going to grow the population by 15 million. Our plan is to build cities at a scale connected by high-speed rail. According to their official website, CLARA is Australia's most ambitious master planning project. 8 compact smart cities across Victoria and New South Wales, connected to Melbourne, Canberra, Sydney by high-speed rail, livable, connected and sustainable, self-efficient in energy and water use, which means you will be drinking your own wastewater. The first network of cities worldwide designed around people but not private cars in 100 years. The first CLARA city is proposed near Shepparton in Victoria's north. It's a vision to transform the settlement patterns of Australia, entrenched for more than 200 years, and ought to be achieved by the private sector with only minimal government involvement. ASIC search shows a web of companies behind Clara, and Cleary says there is a separate consortium agreement and a number of firms that are funding us while we pass milestones. And everyone's going to be passing more than milestones shortly. Mate, this is bad. Until recently, there have been serious doubts that the project would even get off the ground. After being predicted to cost north of $100 billion to fully clear land and develop infrastructure. Could there be something going on beneath the surface? The smoking gun. Interestingly enough, Cleary says they have secured crucial land to begin this mass project around the sites of the first 2 new cities, stating, "We have some land in our control around those locations. It's around those areas, about 10 kilometres from Shepparton." When investigating this, one must ask a question. Is it merely coincidence that this area is one of the locations under serious threat from fires? This is not simply an isolated incident or coincidence. On closer examination, many of the current fires along the east coast correspond to the proposed route for the high-speed rail line and part of the Clara proposal, including setting aside land for this development, which cannot be used for anything else. Let's take a look below at the proposed Smart City rail line, and I've showed you this in my last few videos on the Australian Bushfires, guys. Please, if you haven't seen them, go and take a look. Now let's look at these bushfires across Australia. Notice anything similar? Government funding contribution to the Clara proposal is up to $8 million, a fact sheet on high-speed rail says. And in the aftermath of the loss of these fires, both will have a perfect opportunity to snatch up land that is now being cleared by fires to make way for the rail line. Guys, I've also heard that people who want to rebuild after these fires are getting charged more to stay where they are. It's going to cost them a lot more. This is how they're being driven off the land. Everyone's going to be driven off the land. There will be no country houses left. They're going to put you in smart cities. You're going to be worse slaves than we already are. Little worker bees, like ants or bees in a hive. Those who have lost property to fires along the proposed rail route will likely not be allowed to rebuild on their land, instead encouraged to rebuild in the areas designated for new smart cities. Jesus, guys. In fact, Clara has already signed agreements with landowners along the proposed route for the high-speed train, which have now lapsed and leave a bitter taste for farmers in the areas. Could we be seeing the intentional burning of Australia? How is this all ultimately connected? Agenda 2030. The significant linkage here is that the government fully admits smart cities are part of Australia's significant contribution towards achievement of Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goal 11. And if you haven't heard Anne Bressington, she was a New South Wales politician, go and listen to her about Agenda 21. Anne Bressington, Agenda 21. Just look that up. And while you're there, if you don't know about Agenda 21, go look up some more, because it's devastating. We don't want to be living in that. In September 2015, 193 member states of the United Nations adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, to make up the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Agenda 2030 will change our economies, our environment and our societies, while reshaping old mindsets, behaviours and patterns of living forever. Included in the document are Sustainable Development Goals and 169 individual targets adopted by world leaders at an historic UN summit. Objectives expect to guide the actions of the international community over a 15-year period, 2016 to 2030. Australian Government coordination on implementation of the 2030 Agenda is led by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, and the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, PM&C, in collaboration with individual departments for each individual SDG. Many sustainable development targets such as energy and water, health and well-being, gender equality, climate change, resource distribution and more have already seen many organisations introduce policies and procedures to align with intended goals. The fire phenomenon we are witnessing is being used to promote climate change hysteria, which has driven the UN to call for overhaul of the world trade systems to begin tackling these issues. Bushfires force rethink about how we live. Today, most of Australia's resources are being taken over by foreign entities, including our gas and electricity supplies, water reserve entitlements, surveillance technologies, and much more. Conditions will continue to affect most of regional Australia until the population is forced into highly controlled smart city monoliths connected by high-speed trains currently in the works. Through the introduction of new laws and regulations to restrict the people's use of land and water in the future, as well as the introduction of carbon taxes on almost every human activity in the pretense of saving the environment. The stage is being prepared for the introduction of Agenda 2030 in Australia, and the ongoing bushfire crisis is just the beginning of much larger things to come. Okay, it's from Tot News, guys. This is everything I've been trying to say, but this is said better. Not only that, Agenda 2030, if you get sick, all the disabled will be killed because they can't work. They'll find a humane way to do it, but it will happen. You won't be allowed to grow old, but the elite will, because that's who you'll be working for, by the way. This is a really, really bad thing, guys. Look up Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030. Look it up. Study it. This is what we're heading for if we don't stop this. Okay, guys. Have a good one. Bye.